All right. Welcome to the North Swole
Welcome.
holistic. Although I bought it last year,
Yeah.
and after 12 months of not training legs and only training upper body, I'm feeling a bit restricted.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Looking swole, lads.
Thank you, mate. North Swole.
No, welcome to the North Swole. Right.
Yeah. Thank you. Here we are again.
Becoming a habit.
It is becoming a habit.
Well,
And like all good habits, when it gets to the festive season, a lot of them get derailed, which
exactly.
is the
It's
perfect segue.
probably about to happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So thanks for sitting down. I think we've done an episode similar to this in the past, and actually went back and listened to that episode. And funnily enough, I was complaining about it being like 32 degrees and it was super hot, and today it's like 7 degrees and raining. So not everything changes, like the content of that podcast, but some things do change, like the weather here in Melbourne.
Yeah, it's a bit ridiculous at the moment.
Perfect summer.
I'd like some hot days.
Yeah.
Come on.
So yeah, the festive season is it's fun. There's a lot of indulging, there's a lot of opportunity to celebrate.
Mhm.
You know, you're capping off a year of hard work. You know, even your gym's having Christmas party, but ultimately for many people, it does bring up a time where they do get a little bit nervous or a little bit anxious in terms of how much time there is potentially sidetracked off program, or how it feels like a lot of their actions for a period of time are starting to not necessarily align with the things that they have been working towards for the entire year. And I think that sometimes that comes with trepidation to admit that. There's a lot of guilt associated with, oh, I should be happy, everyone's happy. But, you know, ironically, we've talked a bit about mental health and stuff like that in a couple of episodes now. And it's also the festive season, as much as we amp it up to be happy and jolly and the rest of it, it actually for a lot of people is actually the most depressing time of year, right? And
it's stressful.
Yeah.
A lot of expectation and pressure that comes with this time of year, whether it's putting on yourself or other things, family stresses, work stresses. So it's not always the happiest time of year for some people. That's it.
Yeah. So I think today I just wanted to chat with you about you know, some of the more practical elements that people can take away and try to apply over these weeks in particular, you know, also the rest of the year, these work as well, particularly this time of year, to make that festive season as enjoyable, as bearable as possible. I've actually made a list because it is something that I'm not sure about you, but definitely in my consults, you know, the last couple of weeks, these are the things that we've been reiterating and hammering home. And I think sometimes it just helps to have a bit of a reminder.
For sure.
You know, things that we all know, probably not going to be anything too new in terms of information, but
no, just nice to have a little reminder every once in a while.
Correct. I think sometimes too, like, not that anyone needs my permission, but sometimes working with a coach, one of those things you get is you get that soundboard of like, these are my concerns. This is something that I want to strategize and have a chat about. And ultimately, like, oh, I feel like my coach is telling me it's okay to, you know, indulge and enjoy, then maybe it is okay. And maybe I don't have to be in such a heightened state of stress for the whole month.
Exactly. It's all about that pressure you put on yourself of like, oh my God, like this isn't the me that I'm trying to be. But, you know, over that week or couple of weeks period over Christmas and New Year's, let your guard down a little bit, have a bit of downtime, take a bit of pressure off yourself, but don't let it derail the rest of the year.
Correct. So let's kick it off. I think part of the issue with the festive season is the length of the festive season, right? It's not necessarily that we're just talking about Christmas Day or New Year's Eve. It really is, you know, unlike Easter or Thanksgiving, it's this prolonged month, right, of social occasion after social occasion after social occasion. And like we said before, it's your gym and it's your workplace and
it's getting longer.
Your family. And this month in particular, December covers 4 weekends. Right?
Yeah.
And 5 weekends if you count like the New Year's period. So it's an extended period of time, more than it usually is. And
it's Bublé is defrosting earlier.
He's selling more albums this year because Christmas is running that bit longer. I think the main point of what I've been talking to my clients about this month is perspective, right? And in particular, December, it's not necessarily a month that we're looking for massive progress and stride forwards, regardless of the goal, because a big part of obviously the MTMM program is long-term sustainability, right? And being able to integrate your nutrition, you know, with your life and with your lifestyle and all the things that encompasses. And Christmas is a great example of why we encourage our clients to take longer term contracts so that you get the ability to work with someone through each of those challenging elements of the year. And my view is like, you do anything for 8 weeks or 6 weeks, but how much does that give you indicative of what are your skills when it is 4 or 5 weeks of a 6-week period is the December period?
Of course.
Right? So I think my first kind of point to keep in mind is having December goal almost be mitigation rather than progress.
For sure.
Right. So worrying less about having to surge forward and focusing more on, okay, with everything that's going on, what are some steps or some practical tools that I can put in place to stop myself regressing.
Exactly.
Right. Ultimately, if you've been doing this for a little while and you're coming into the festive season with a little bit of practice under the belt, most of the things we want you to do are just keep to your regular routine as much as possible. Yes, you might have something on every weekend for the next 5 weekends, but it makes what you're doing that Monday to Friday more important. And I think the temptation when there is so much indulging is to think like, just write the whole month off.
Yeah.
Whereas if we can keep training, keep, meal prepping, keep those regular mindfulness activities that we get our clients to do and keep them as present and on ball as possible, I think you'd be quite surprised with, maybe you do actually manage to take some smaller steps forward rather than just saying it's a write-off, I'll start again in January, by which time all those habits and behaviors that we've been cultivating all year have now had 4 weeks to be overridden by the complete opposite. And then come January, half the battle is spending the next month starting to get back to where you were in November. And all of a sudden you've lost 2 months or 3 months as opposed to just like a couple of weekends that get a little bit out of hand.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that. And my first point kind of plays on that as well. And that is make a plan and kind of stick to your daily routine. If you're someone that knows you've got a Christmas dinner this day, you've got family lunch the next day, that doesn't mean that your practices and your routines the morning or the afternoon have to be different.
Yeah.
So, you've got to work lunch on whatever. Get up in the morning, do your usual thing, have your usual breakfast, take your dog for a walk, whatever you usually do. Have your celebration, your festivities, have fun. When you've done that, when you're home, just get back into your normal routine. Because a lot of people have that perspective of, I've ruined it for the day, and then they throw the rest of the day, the rest of the week, the rest of the month away.
Yeah.
If you keep your daily habits and keep on track that way, then you're going to be, like you said, in a much better position come the end of the month, and you're just really nailing in those habits that you have been building during the year.
Yeah. And
it's muscle memory, put it that way. You're just going to be building better and better habits and keep progressing towards your goals rather than regressing and undoing hard work, like you said.
I guess it also gives you, if you look at it as a challenge, it's the opportunity to practice.
Exactly.
Okay, what are the safety nets I generally have, or what are my daily practices, and how strong are they when we actually have them stress tested? Because if they fall over at the first, I've had a night off and therefore there goes the whole month.
Yeah.
Then we've probably underdone how much work or how much progress we think we've made over the course of the year.
Yeah.
So definitely sticking to routine. I think, we're going to be indulging a little bit more in terms of a caloric impact. We're going to be eating a little bit more than necessary. So it makes it, use those extra gains in the gym, like hit some heavy squats, hit some heavy deadlifts, like put that energy to
make it
work.
Yeah.
But even on that point, the thing that I like the most about what you just said is staying with your regular routine, even as far as your food goes. Right? So you're much better off, eating your regular breakfast, your regular lunch, your regular snacks, and then going into a social occasion at night well fed.
Yeah.
You're probably, you're way more likely to make better decisions at that point, as opposed to, I'm going to just lick an apple for the whole day and I'm going to save all these calories that last meal, get to that last meal, you're ravenous, you're starving, you do the loaf of bread that's on the table before dinner even arrives, and you just do way more damage.
And that's it. Like, because a lot of people do get into that mindset of, if I skip this meal, I build up, a calorie allowance.
Yeah.
But then if you do that, you're going to go so well over what you would have done if you had just eaten your normal breakfast. Like, I know for me, if I was to skip a meal, come the dessert table, I would annihilate it.
Yeah.
I'd be done. And then that's when you get to the mindset of, well, why did I do that? And then comes like the disappointment as
The
well.
regret, the remorse.
Yeah, and all that stuff, like all that extra stress is just so unnecessary. If you just stick to your usual routine, enjoy your time, but
Well, we know discipline is a finite resource.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So think of how much you have to use during the day in order to not eat anything. And then once it's in front of you, resource depleted.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Willpower's gone. Like, nope.
Speaking of big events, I think this is probably my number two. I know Kat's really big on this one because she's so well organized, but she likes to plan out in advance her December, and then as the invitations and things starts rolling in and they go up on the calendar, she will highlight one or two of the 10 and be like, that's my big night and that's my big night. Right. So she'll still make an appearance to most things, but it's like you're calling your shot early.
Yeah.
And I think when you do that, you go into those nights being like, cool, this is the one that I said I was going to really enjoy. Let's go. Exactly. And there's a little bit less like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
And when those are coming up and that you're getting those occasions just on the horizon, it does make it a little bit easier to go into those other events and not have as big a night.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And I think while we're talking about big nights and letting yourself go, big one, I think alcohol consumption.
Yeah.
Kind of mediating that, being really conscious of that, because we all love a social drink and not like there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But the more kind of alcohol you're having, the more your intuition lowers and you're going to be making worse food choices. You're going to indulge more. So I think that's a really big one where people underestimate.
Yeah.
So if you kind of, like you say, if you've got 7 days of things, pick the one where you're like, this is the one I'm not going to stress so much about, let myself go. The rest of the days, just try and, limit that intake a little bit more because you're less likely to overindulge.
Yeah. Yeah. I think too much of it, a good thing is no longer a good thing.
No.
And I think maybe that's one of the reasons we typically get so busy in January is because when you're on plan, you're on program and you're in that routine and you're eating, pretty wholesome foods most of the time, you're training regularly. I think the idea of like indulging or, the processed foods and the big meals out becomes more and more appealing. And then you go through December where it's like every week you've got a couple of them and you get to Jan, you're like, I just don't feel great. I feel like shit. I feel, soft. I feel heavy. I feel slow. I feel lethargic. I'm low energy. It's my motivation's, quite low. And it is that like, oh, maybe I don't want to do all these things all the time. That
exactly. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
All right, good. Jeez, working through it. Speaking of alcohol, bouncing back quickly is more important than like the size of the night you've just had.
Absolutely.
So I think, and maybe digressing a little bit, but because alcohol we would consider the fourth macronutrient.
Yeah.
Because it's not naturally occurring, we have no storage capacity for it. So whenever we're consuming alcohol, the body is going to switch to burning the ethanol as our primary fuel source until we've gotten through it all because we can't store it, which means that everything else that we eat go straight to storage.
Yeah.
Right. So we talk about understanding the true impact of alcohol. Until we get rid of all that booze, we're not going to go back to burning our regular macros as fuel. Yeah. And so what typically gets people into trouble is when you have the big night, you make your food decisions with what's available at 2 a.m. on your way home, probably a garlic greasy kebab, right?
Amazing.
And then the next day you're hungover, you feel like shit. There's no meal prep. So you do what's convenient again, right? And then Monday rolls around, you're still at work, you're scrambling to kind of get some bits and pieces back together. Maybe it takes till Wednesday before you're really back on program. Absolutely. And then there's another social occasion on Friday night, and that's a repeat process. So it takes one big night, all of a sudden becomes like this week to 10 days of being off plan, Yeah. And so for me, what's more important than having the big night is how quickly you can get back to routine.
For sure.
So especially if you do have something on weekly or twice a week, sometimes if you might feel like, well, what's the point in those 4 days if I'm just going to do it again that weekend? I think it makes those 4 days that you have during the week or 5 days during the week between events even more important.
Yeah.
So taking steps to mitigate bad decisions before the big night. Make sure there's something in the fridge and the cupboard. Maybe have some meal prep done before you go out for your big night. So that on the Sunday, you can get back into it, you're prepped for the week. And on a Sunday morning, like, you've done the crime, now do the time. We were kind of having this joke about the dinner that we're going to be having.
Yes.
That we'll have a couple of drinks, and then it's like, yeah, and then we're going to get up early on a Saturday morning and go and train. And that really is part of whatever you can do to burn through all that ethanol to get it out and get it done, so you can get back to it. That's
where, like you're saying before, the discipline comes into it, because I mean, no one wants to get up on, you know, the next morning after having a big night and have health foods and things that are going to benefit them, make them feel good. You want the greasy kebab. You don't want to train, but it's testing that discipline of, like you said, do the crime, do the time, get back into it, prove to yourself that you can do it, you'll feel better for it the next day.
Correct. And you do always feel better.
Absolutely.
After it's done. So yeah, bouncing back quickly is super important.
Yeah.
All right, this one's a bit of a lengthy one, and it's probably one of the issues that maybe we don't necessarily foresee or think to foresee ahead of time, particularly as nutritionists, but it's always something that ends up coming up after the fact, and that is dealing with the one or two family members that always feel like it's their responsibility to comment on your food choices, how you're looking, whatever else they have no fucking right to speak about.
We all got them.
There's always at least one or two at every table. And I think probably the takeaway here is to remember two things. The first thing is, typically it's the things that we're most judgmental of in others that we're the most self-conscious.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's generally a reflection of how that individual is feeling about themselves, rather than it's got anything to do with anything that you're doing. So I think that one's pretty important to keep in mind. What you choose to do with that information in the moment in terms of retaliation is completely up to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you are confident in, you know, the decisions that you're making, that they're aligned with the goals that you're pursuing, which is building you to be the person that you envisage yourself being and trying to grow into, you get to a point where, like, you need to be less invested in other people's opinion of you, of what you're doing, and more invested in how you feel about what you're chasing and what you're doing and the actions that dictates.
Absolutely. And sometimes I think it can even come just from a point of small talk. Say if it's not anyone that you've seen in a really long time, they notice you're not having a drink. It's the easiest segue to come in and be like, oh, you're not drinking today? Like, yeah, have a drink.
Yeah.
And try and push you, because, like, you know, it is such a festive season, is such a culture of drinking, eating, celebrations, that people, it's the easiest thing to comment on, rather than anything else. That's the segue into talking. So it's doesn't always have any hidden meaning by it. They'll walk away and not think about it again, but you're like, oh, now I feel bad. Should I be drinking? I feel judged.
Booze is a funny one, right? Because it's like the only drug that you're made to feel guilty for not ingesting.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And number two, it's almost like when you tell someone, oh no, I'm not drinking, that the first reaction is like, do you think you're better than me? Or that you're actually judging them for drinking. It becomes a very defensive position.
Yeah.
Which, funnily enough, is interesting, because non-alcoholic drinks are like the number one growing, fast moving
for sure.
consumer good. So there's obviously quite an appetite for people out there that either A, just want to drink out of a beer bottle and avoid the conversation, or two, genuinely like the taste of booze but don't want the alcohol. So maybe the tide is turning in that respect. But whether it be your drinking choices or your nutrition choices, you can go in there, and if you're prepared for someone to say something, and even, you know, your own reaction and how you take it might be a gut check still in how you actually are feeling. And if you are quite defensive and you do get quite angry, then that might be something to do a little bit of like self-examination on in the new year as well.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
Or just avoid that person. Go sit at the other side of the table, next to the family members that you do like or do enjoy spending time with.
Or just like as simple as having something in your head already. If you know you're going to encounter that kind of comment, just know the way you're going to respond. Even if it is
fuck off.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was what I was going to say. No, but you know, it could literally be as easy as saying, oh no, I've had a really big few days of celebrations. Yeah, I just not really feeling like it today.
Yeah.
Shut it off, go about your day.
Just reiterate to them that actually doesn't have anything to do with them.
Exactly. Exactly. This is my choice.
From a practical perspective, obviously like the actual Christmas day, the lunches, the dinners and things like that, I think typically, I'm not sure how it is in your family, but we come from a family of feeders, right? And so typically when there's 5 of us having dinner, there's enough food for 30. So when there is actually 30 people for dinner, it's like the Super Bowl for my aunties and my sister and my mum. But even with that, if again you've been doing this for a while, you're gonna have some pretty developed skills in terms of like your decision making in the moment. And I think it comes down to just trusting in that, right? So I know for myself, I love eating and I love eating at Christmas. But typically what I like to do is go and stick towards the seafoods, the turkeys, the hams, the chickens, get plenty of protein in, plenty of salads and veggies. And then I'm usually so full from a huge amount of protein, more protein than I could possibly utilize, that like dessert is like a leave it or take it. It's not like a let's go. It's like a much easier decision to make because you are so well satiated and so cool, and it's protein.
Exactly. Right? I mean, I've developed a similar habit over the last few years because I am a dessert queen. Such a sweet tooth. Love desserts. So my habit is not so much go towards the protein, but the vegetables. I will make sure I eat a lot first. I will fill my plate with veggies. And then, you know, I love like the broccoli and cauliflower with white sauce, like the scallop potatoes, but I'll make sure I'm eating, you know, the normal veggies first without the cheese sauce and everything. Eat that, maybe eat a little bit of your meat and whatever, pretty full, but then go have like a little bit of the special stuff. And then by the time I actually get to dessert, I'm looking at it, this all looks so delicious. But I have the ability then to only choose like 1 or 2 little things, not the whole table, which I could definitely do. I could just like skip the meal and eat all of the desserts.
And then I think maybe to cap off, like keep in mind that regardless of how you trial and whether you feel like you've tried and failed and whether the whole month gets out of hand, there's nothing that you can't then address after the fact, right? So if it does get away from you, if the habits are harder to hold through the month, training's a bit more sporadic, the nutritional decisions even between events aren't so great, don't panic. Don't do the drastic things. All we need to do is just get back to doing what we know works. And if it's easier to do that from Jan rather than feel like it's just another thing that I feel like I'm failing at through December, then do that. Christmas comes once a year. Make it more about the people that you're spending the time with, catching up with, enjoying time with, try to be present. Don't track your Christmas lunch. I don't want anybody logging their turkey to my fitness pal.
No, absolutely not.
In fact, and I said this before, I don't want anyone on their phones at all at Christmas. You know, stay off the social media, just enjoy the people around you, enjoy the time that you get. And then, whatever happens, just straight back on it as quickly as you can after the fact.
There's another 11 months of the year to get things right. So
48 weeks.
That's it.
Until the next one. You've got to work on it.
So don't let it derail the rest of your year. Acknowledge what happened. Notice some things that you might be able to do a little bit better come the next social occasion, or don't. Do whatever you want, as long as you jump back on and get back into those good habits, I think. Yeah.
I think the self-reflection is important. And if you do notice that it's, it happens to be booze, like when I'm drinking, I'm not making good decisions. Then it also gives you the ability to be like, okay, well then how often do you really want to be drinking? Right? Whether that be throughout the year, whether that be just in that December block.
For sure.
But I think for anyone listening, we hope you enjoy the festive season.
Absolutely. I think the biggest takeaway from any of it is enjoy it. Try and take the stress out of it as much as you can. Like I said, enjoy the time with your family and friends. There might be a lot of people that you don't get to see very often. It's foods and celebrations that you're not doing all that often. So enjoy it, but just know that you have got knowledge in there to make good choices if you feel the need to do so. And jump back in.
If you don't beat yourself up, just get back to it.
Exactly. We're only human.
Thank you.
3
in 3 weeks. On the roll.
We are on a roll. I mean, always a good time, like comfy couch, decent company.
No fan.
Sometimes there's a dog, like, you know,
Yeah, it's pretty good.
can't complain really. We've got some festive t-shirts to
Correct.
fit the scene.
Correct. Splitting at the seams, but that'll do.
I didn't get the memo. Could have,
It was a last minute decision.
of course.
Yeah.
Well, next week.
Correct.
Next week I'll bring my festive shirt.
Sounds good. All right. Cheers.
Perfect.
All right.